Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce to you one of the books that right now I'm trying to sweat in terms of writing, which is going to be called Enhancing True Blackness, in terms of emphasizing the challenges of neo-colonialism that we fight continuously, or that the black man has actually fought continuously in terms of redeeming himself, in terms of asserting his authenticity of sorts on planet Earth, although that shouldn't be the case. Those of you who are probably good historians would remember that in the US for quite some time, for about probably 400 years plus, the Constitution of America, in spite of the fact that they pride themselves in being the advocates of democracy of sorts, or human rights, had actually designated the black man for having been 3/4 of a human being. You can wonder what that means. And recently, even when we were celebrating the day of the redemption of sorts in America for the black man, it took them 2 years for them to know that had actually been freed from slavery. So we have had that challenge. We have had that challenge that our brothers and sisters were freed off the shores of Africa and exported into slavery, and perhaps that reminds us some of the books that we need to read, how Europe underdeveloped Africa. Whether or not that is the basis of what negates or puts Africa in that stand that it is today is a question of debate. But fundamentally, one thing we must understand is that the black man has for a long time been castigated, renegated, and enslaved, and he has actually ended up being a tool of sorts, a machine. And no wonder that many of the industrializations that have taken place in Europe or in America, for that matter, have actually been proponded or encouraged by the black man. So it has a lot of impact in terms of trying to free our understanding. And for you to understand that, you may have to visit some of those countries that are perhaps argued to have been colonial masters of sorts, and then you understand the legacy, the colonial legacy that had actually been embedded in these countries. That even as we interact with the people today, there are still people who are still stigmatized, or who are still having those colonial tendencies of what the black man and what the black man stands for in terms of creed, in terms of intellectual acumen, in terms of giftings or potential. So we still have the debate, and I'm telling you, many times I've interacted with people who still look at the black man as a second class or third class citizen, which shouldn't be the case, because history has it that the black melanin that the black man enjoys has a lot of dominance in terms of color, and it has helped in terms of helping them become better individuals in terms of thriving on planet Earth. Not to say that any other race should actually be discriminated. The Americans have this other argument that we hold this creed to be true, that all men are created equal. The argument of all men is a question of debate. But in this book, we make proposition in terms of trying to make the argument that the black man, in spite of the stereotypes that have been embedded upon, in terms of the unfortunities that may have been visited upon him or her, they still have that unique place on planet Earth. So it's important for us to understand the history of the black man, and the fact that we have to decolonize our mind and be able to assert ourselves on planet Earth in terms of knowing that we are, if anything, not different from the white man. And I say that with absolute, conviction. In a sense that Dr. King used to say that a time is going to come when people are not going to be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So we have to assert. That's what Dr. King taught us. Dr. King taught us that that time where people are going to judge you by the color of your skin is going to turn, and we're going to be judged by the content of our character. So I think there was also another incredible man who said that the world has made being black a vice. I intend to make it a virtue. And it's important for you to understand that it's time for us as Africans, or perhaps the black man, to redeem themselves and assert ourselves in terms of intellectual prowess, in terms of sporting, in terms of everything that you're destined to do. Dr. King said it right. He said, you may not be a shrub or a pine on top of a hill. You may be a shrub in the valley, but be the best side of the shrub on the side of the rail. In other words, if it falls your luck to be a strip stripper, strip feels like Raphael painted pictures, or like Beethoven composed music, or like how Shakespeare wrote poetry. Do your job so well that all the hosts of heaven will look down and say, there lives a great speaker. In others, whatever task that lays in your hands, do it to the best of your ability. Do your job so well that the dead, the living, and the unborn cannot do it any better. So perhaps that's what Dr. King always said in his speech called The Blueprint. The blueprint is that we have to understand that, I think Edmund Banku said that he that starts behind in a race must forever remain behind or run faster than the man in front. That is the dilemma. So in spite of the stereotypes that the world may have upon the black man, we have to redeem ourselves and understand that it's incumbent upon us to redeem our thoughts, to redeem our desires, to redeem our intellectual acumen, to work so hard that we are as good as anybody. Ralph Waldo Emerson said in 1871, if a man can build a better house or make a better mousetrap than his neighbor, even if they build a house in the woods, the world will make a billion